Welcome to the Gay Buddhist Forum, where teachers from all schools of Buddhism offer their perspectives on the Dharma and its application in modern times, especially for LGBTQI audiences. These talks are offered freely to the world and made possible by appreciative listeners. If you would like to support our efforts to share the Dharma with underserved audiences, please visit gaybuddhist.org. There you can donate, find a list of upcoming speakers, or enjoy many hundreds of these recorded talks dating back to 1996.
Our speaker today is Stephen Tierney. Stephen Tierney formerly was a professor of community mental health and chair of the Masters in Counseling Psychology core curriculum at California Institute for Integral Studies. He just recently retired from that position. And he is a licensed psychotherapist in California and a nationally certified counselor. An ordained Buddhist priest, he is the co-founder and chief education officer of the San Francisco Mindfulness Foundation. Dr. Tierney teaches and lectures and does workshops and retreats nationally and has taught at a number of universities. His interests include Buddhist psychology and mindfulness-based therapies for addiction, recovery, and resiliency services. Welcome, Stephen.
Thank you, Joe. Always good to be in a room with you, even if it's virtual. Good morning, everyone. Pleasure to be back. This week we celebrate in the Buddhist world Vesak, which is the first full moon. So for some reason, some people are celebrating it today, actually, probably to make it a day when in tradition people could attend. But it's actually the full moon, which will be Thursday, the 7th. And Vesak is the celebration of Buddha's birthday, his enlightenment, and his entrance to parinirvana, or when he ascended. But importantly for Buddhists, it's a time that we reflect on the teachings of the traditional Buddha and what it means to be a Buddhist. And so here we are again at a Sunday morning GBF meeting with a chance to reflect on what it means to be a Buddhist and what for us it means to be gay Buddhists and in a deep and meaningful fellowship. So the last time I was here in this seat with this group was the first of these Zoom meetings that we did. None of us knew exactly what we were doing, and we were pushing a lot of buttons and seeing what would happen. And there was a lot of talk about what it would be like to have to keep doing this for 2 weeks. So lots of shoulder shrugging and thinking that we could make it through 14 days until this was lifted and on we would go. So, here we are. And tomorrow will be day 50 of the official shelter in place in San Francisco. And here we are, happily all together again on another Sunday. And not only not daunted by the shelter in place environment we live in, but in a number far larger than might be 41 of us. So a number that's the same or a little larger than who might be able to show up on Sunday in the Mission beautiful temple that we practice in there. So I've been, as many of you probably have been listening to a lot of talks and participating in various sanghas and communities around not just San Francisco, but actually around the world. I was in one in Ireland, a meditation session in Ireland Friday afternoon, which was kind of cool, seeing as my annual vacation to Ireland may indeed not happen this year. But I've heard a lot of talks, and some of them really powerful and helpful for me as I figure out how to deal with, my life at this time. And the talk I heard on Friday night, the person used the word unprecedented and invited us to think about how many times we've heard that word recently, and that these are unprecedented times, and we're, public health announcements and news reports and political and even commercials on television now for various products, living in unprecedented times. And if you just shop at Target or buy a Toyota, things will be much better. But it's the use of that word that I was finding interesting. Unprecedented means things that have never happened before. And the fact of the matter is that we are living in certainly a crisis of a health crisis, about to be an economic crisis, perhaps a food security crisis. But it's only unprecedented because it's happening to us and it's happening here at home. we've lived through viruses before. The Spanish flu in the 1920s took more than 100 million lives. HIV, that we're all very familiar with, 37 million people living with it, and 33 million over the many years have died. So, the other thing about our life right now is that our generation that's essentially lived in peace since the Vietnam War, where 400,000 Americans were killed, and more than double that when we consider all of the people who died in that war. And in World War II, which some of you may have been around for, I was not quite, but another 400,000. So we've had situations where the economy has gone bust, and where there have been deaths and illness unparalleled each time. And so it seems to me that the unprecedented piece, we're now at, in the United States, 1,100,000. And, we have some folks who are telling us that it's over with and we should stop worrying about it. And just to know that there were 3,000 new cases yesterday, that people are still getting the illness and dying, but that it's not unprecedented. What's unprecedented is that it's happening right here, that food security is an issue for us, that the economics are an issue for us, that we each know probably someone who is sick, perhaps who has passed away, or who has survived COVID. And we certainly each know people that are suffering from fear and overwhelm and so forth. So that's the unprecedented piece. And so when I look to my Buddhist teachings to figure out how I could think about living in what are indeed not unprecedented times, but are very personal times for me and for each of us and for us together as a community. The first teaching that I came across in Japanese says, Nichi Nichi Kore Kojutsu. And the Buddha is quoted as saying, every day is a good day. That's the teaching. And so, given the brief moment I spent, because it must have been very many moments on statistics, because we're all sick to death of them probably, except those who are true disciples of such things. But thinking about that, thinking about how can each day be a good day, given what's going on right now. And so there are a number of ways that gets translated. For me, as an old queen, my translation was to sing, nobody knows the troubles I've seen, nobody knows but me. So whoever wrote that every day is a good day thing couldn't possibly be suffering with the lines that I have to put up with at Molly Stone's, for instance, really serious problems. And so I'm trying to be very clear about getting over myself. But the other translation that I really liked is a translation that Thich Nhat Hanh uses. And he says that the translation is to live every day meaningfully. And so that's what I've been trying to concentrate on and to really to think about just the expression that I used before. Here we are, 50 days in sheltered in place. And to not concentrate on the number 50, but to concentrate on the sentence that says, here we are. We're together again, as close to 50 of us on this call. And we have an opportunity to live each day meaningfully, to take the day that we've got, which is a day with shelter in place and with the virus, and to decide that we can focus on, we started our day today or came to this moment in it. For some people, it may not be starting. You may have been up really early. But we're starting our day with 50 of our brothers, and I can't see all the pictures, maybe a sister or two. I'm sure there's a sister or two now that I think about it, whether I can see their pictures or not. But a quote that I really like and that I use is from the Buddhist teacher, Aretha Franklin. And she said, I sing to the realists, people who accept it exactly like it is. If there's a problem, there are tears when it's sad. I express problems. There are tears when it's sad and smiles when it's happy. It seems simple to me, but to some, I guess, having feelings takes courage. So I think what I'm thinking about these days is to really have the feelings, feel the feelings, and own them, but not be bogged down by them. So I was here last week with GBF, and we had a really rich and well-orchestrated program. And we were basically standing still and looking deeply at ourselves. And we asked, there were two questions. And Baruch asked the first question, And I must tell you that I'm not exactly sure what he said, because my answer to the question was what's up for me right now was my mind automatically on autopilot went to a list of those things that are up right now, big and small sort of challenges in life. And then we broke into our small groups, and the very first person that shared talked about a beautiful story about how he is a writer, and he hasn't written so much in a long time, and he's been writing again during the shelter in place. And he's discovered two things. One, that he really enjoys writing, and two, that he's really quite good at it. And it wasn't said with anything less than humility and pride. Just like, I picked this back up and found that I'm really good at it. So for me, I was thinking that I was really grateful that we had those questions, and really grateful that we got to spend some time in conversation with a few others. And we're going to try and do that today as well. But I was thinking that by the time we got through with the second question last week is, what are the possibilities for joy and delight and connection, creative expression, and being of service that are presented by the world in which I find myself living right now, and that you all find yourselves living with. So the gift of Buddha practice, it seems to me, has been described in many ways as helping us, and what we were doing last week, helping us to return to our true nature, a nature before we were too busy to write, before we were too afraid of failure to draw or paint, before we were too worried about what people would say if we decided to write some poetry. And before we were too distracted by ego to go for long walks, or to ride a bike, or to run, or to otherwise release the endorphins that we know will make us healthier and happier. Simply put, in the teaching of the Buddha, who were we before we got fixed in our discerning mind? Or who were we before we got fixed in our ruminating mind? So simply put, what can we do to just fully have the experience of living in this present moment? And so right now, we could say that we're 8 weeks in and counting. I shared with the small group I was in last week that at the second week of this practice, I went to my closet, deep into the back of my closet, and took out some weights that I had, and yoga belts and a mat. And I put them in my living room where I couldn't possibly ignore them. And last Saturday, as I was cleaning my apartment, I had to dust all of those things off because I took them out and put them in the middle of the living room. And there they have been sitting for what's now 45 days. I've used them twice this week because I was so embarrassed to have to admit that last week. But, there's this opportunity we have. We have 50 days of being alone, whoever we live with, and with us coming together on Sundays. And we could think of that as being sheltered in place, or we could recognize that for many of us, that's the same kind of opportunity that in a few months, when life gets to out of shelter in place, I myself will be paying thousands of dollars to go to some place for a retreat, where they will give me a room in which I will be sheltered in place. And I will have periodic opportunities to come together with people, I hope, just like you, to have discussions and to sit together as we're doing today. And they'll call that a retreat rather than call it shelter in place. And I will happily sign a registration, and in fact have recently, and send off the payment to register. So we have this opportunity to think of what we're in now as shelter in place, or to think of it as a retreat. We get to spend our time the way we want to spend it. We get to create our day the way we want to create it, because the world outside and around us is exactly what it is. And I love a quote that many of you know from Ernest Hemingway that says, "The world breaks everyone sooner or later, and afterwards many are stronger at the broken places." So he also, of course, just to be transparent, because it's Hemingway says, it kills the very good and the very gentle and the very brave impartially. And if you are none of those things, it will surely kill you as well, but in no special hurry. So we can laugh at Hemingway's sort of dark view of the world, or we can think that, in fact, what that is a really strong encouragement to live in the present moment. So this week, what I've been thinking about since that wonderful conversations last week here is the opportunity we have as individuals and as fellows in GBF, because indeed we are all Buddhas, to know that we do have some power. That the wonderful guy that shared last week, that he is a writer and a good one, and he enjoys it. And in both of the groups I was in, that also generated from other people the notion, there are things I'm enjoying right now about the shelter in place, things I wouldn't have had time to do, or things I didn't do in the first couple of weeks because I was just waiting for it to be over. But at some point, each of us has the opportunity to re-engage, to say, now I'm going to live, and I'm going to get back to having the life I want to have, to having the spiritual practice I want to have. And there's a writing called The Gospel of St. Thomas, in which he says, if you bring forth what is within you will save you. If you do not bring forth what is within you, what you do not bring forth will destroy you. So this retreat, this big worldwide retreat that we've been on for the last 50 days, gives us an opportunity to really think about the lives that we want to lead, the spiritual lives that we want to have, the connections that we want to have, and the fellowship that we're willing to put our energy and love and commitment to. There's a wonderful poem by a person named Wang Wei, who lived in 759, and it's called In My Middle Years. And here's the poem. In my middle years, I became fond of the way, the Tao, and made my home in the foothills of South Mountain. When the spirit moves me, I go off to be by myself, to see the things that I alone must see. I follow the stream to its source. And so that poem really speaks to me, because I think we are currently in a place where we have this opportunity to be alone with a person or persons that we live with, and with the 50 of us that come together on a Sunday, and perhaps the people we work with during the week, or dance with, or write with, or paint with, or whatever it is we're doing. But we have this opportunity to not be preoccupied with the data and the facts, but to really be engaged in our own lives and our own spiritual practice. John Daido Loori, the Buddhist teacher, says that most of us spend our time preoccupied, constantly carrying on some internal dialogue. We look, but we don't see. We listen, but we don't hear. We eat, but we do not taste. And we love, but unfortunately, sometimes we do not feel, because we're too busy analyzing and thinking about, rather than just having the experience. He says our senses are receiving all this information, but because of that preoccupation with cognition, our minds and hearts do not have the space and time to connect. So Zazen practice, our Buddhist practices, give us that opportunity. We sit for half an hour on some days, and most of us for some time during the week, and we just get to be still. Before our minds became discerning, before our minds became ruminating, we get to let our obsessions go and our compulsions go. And John Daido Loori says that the stilled mind is like a mirror. It does not process. It does not analyze. It simply reflects. We look at the world to see things as they are, and as Suzuki Roshi says, to observe things as they are, and to let everything go as it goes. So our mind, when it becomes still, is this beautiful gift, always open and always receptive. So I think the question for us right now is how do we use this time that we have, not to worry about what's going on around us, but to really allow the lotus that is sitting in that mud to really blossom and to be beautiful, and to be amongst the other 50 lotuses that are on this call today. How do we use this time to discover and to remember who I am and what I wanted? Was I ever a writer? And could I be again? Or if I've never took pen to paper or sat down at the computer because I was afraid I wasn't good enough, but it's always been in the back of my mind, what a great time to just give it a shot, give it a try. And as we discovered last week, to reach out to other people here in the fellowship, because there are other people that will support us if that's something that we wanted to do. So there's a wonderful quote that shows up on Facebook once in a while that says, life isn't about finding yourself. Life is about creating yourself. You are always there. So that goes to a Buddhist teaching that I really like, which is one of the koans that I want to share with you. The monk Mio was very jealous of the sixth patriarch Ino because he had received his robe and bowl. He had received Dharma transmission, in other words. And so the monk chases the patriarch through the hills, and he's really angry, and he thinks that he got something that he, Mio, should have gotten instead. So the patriarch, who has indeed received awakening, turns around and places his bowl and his robe on the ground and says, "Here, take it if you want it." So Mio, of course, goes right over and tries to take it and pick it up. And he can't. They can't be lifted because, of course, they're not for him or not for him yet. So he becomes overwhelmed with shame. That's something unfamiliar to many of us. And he says to the patriarch, "Can you ever possibly forgive me? Can you ever forgive me? I've done such a horrible thing." And the patriarch says, "Don't think good or evil. In this very moment, just think, what is your original face? What is your original face? Who were you originally before you started coveting my Dharma transmission or before you started thinking about Buddhism at all? Who were you when you were just still, when you were just sitting?" And so in the koan, they tell us that that seems like a question. And in fact, it's worded in some places as, what face did you have before your parents were born? And so the teaching about that is, think about who you were before your parents told you you were the best little boy in America, or in some cases, the worst. Before your parents thought about who you should be and what you should be, and you strived to meet their expectations or to defy them. Who were you before that? And so the question isn't a hard one. It teaches us in the koan. It's like asking the sunflower what it was before it was a sunflower. It was just the flower before it was tall or beautiful or past its prime or yellow or no longer yellow and kind of brown. What was the sunflower before it was a sunflower? And a true Zen master would never ask us to be or to see something that wasn't already there. So today and during this time, we have this wonderful opportunity, as when we said, to see the things that only I can see, to really take a look at those things. And so one of the ways that I've been doing that and that I invite you to do that is through a Gatha practice. And many of you have a practice such as that, simply living by vow. Zen Vows for Daily Living is a book by Robert Aiken that's easily available on Amazon if you decide you're interested after we talk about it a bit. But he says that these are basically small vows that we can actually accomplish. And they have to do with the activities of daily living, just the ordinary things, because the Buddha has taught us that the ordinary things are indeed the Buddhist teachings, are indeed the Dharma, however we face what's happening day to day. And so those are examples of the Dharma that starts right with us, right in our daily life. And as we choose to embrace it and to celebrate it and to deal with the fact that some of it's good and some of it's not. And so I know that for me, an example of that is that in the best of times, we can have a good plan for life and a good spiritual condition. And then we get run over by reality. So an example of that would be you wake up one morning this week or last week. You have a plan for the day. You're going to have a good workout. You're going to have a healthy, balanced meal. You've got plans for the other 2 meals today to also be healthy. You're going to do several hours of productive, efficient work. And you're going to have some nourishing time with your partner, family, or friends or colleagues. And then life happens. So as you step into that shower after your workout, there's no hot water in your apartment today. And then you go into the kitchen and your loving partner who you were planning on having a day with has eaten the last of the oatmeal, and it's all gone. And then you go into the living room where your wonderful dog or cat who you really love had an unfortunate stomach situation all over your favorite rug in the apartment. And so life has happened. And so your plans for how to deal with the day have just been changed. So, this is an example where reality says good morning. And now, what will you make of yourself today with those 3 things happening to your plan? So for most of us, hopefully on a grand day, we would go to wherever our zafu is or our chair and sit down. We would get quiet and centered, and we would bring mindful awareness and get grounded, and we would do that. So for some of us, that's not possible because we're already on the way out the door. Or, the carpet has to be cleaned, or grocery shopping has to be done. So what I like about the Gatha practices is that it's taking an opportunity to say, okay, here's life has said good morning. What will I make of myself now? So let me make a small vow or set a small intention to lead my day, not perplexed by those things, but fully embracing them and determined to still have a spiritual life, to still be a good partner, good friend, good colleague, a good member of this fellowship and Sangha. So what I like there's many ways to do gathas. What I like, and the reason I recommend to you Aiken's method, is he does 4 things in each of his. First, he starts with something that I'm experiencing or engaging in right now. And then you make a small vow, something that's manageable, something that you can actually do, that you want to do. And the way he words his, that you do that in the context of all other beings. And I'm going to read you some of those. And the reason for that is so that you know, if your whole day has been destroyed by the fact that the dog has made a mess on your favorite rug, you're not the only one. Lots of people have messes in their life this morning, and lots of people have figured out how to do with that. So as you'll see when I read you a couple of these, you make this vow. You say, today I'm facing this, and so I vow with all beings, which is the second line of all of his gathas. I vow with all beings. And the reason for that is to put it in context, that what's happening to me is happening to me. And it's like things that are happening to all 50 of you, and that you have decided that you're going to live with that going on. Then there's the action step, something simple, something that's available, something that you're capable of. And so you're moving by doing these gathas from being stuck to being in action, to being about your life. So I'll read you just a couple of them that I really find enjoyable. When I panic at losing my bearings, I vow with all beings to acknowledging that the error is panic, not losing my familiar ground. Another one says, when a demon disrupts my zazen, I vow with all beings to remember who generates demons and to return with a smile to my breathing. When amused by thoughts in zazen, I vow with all beings to wave them through with a smile and not to follow them out the door. So acknowledging something small that we can be faced with, then vowing with all beings to do something about that, and then deciding what that will be and not to follow it out the door. What would be the benefit of that? And then a favorite of mine is, when I'm left with nothing to say, I vow with all beings to rest content in the knowledge that there really is nothing to say. So there's a whole book of opportunities for us to do that. And so what I want to do is to have us go into some discussion groups. And I'm going to invite us to have an opportunity to think about a gatha that we might have for today, this week, and to share those with four other, there will be in groups of 4, I think, given the size of the crowd. 4 or 5, that might make sense. There's 37 of us, yeah. So maybe 4 people, 5 people in the group. And that what I want us to do is think of a situation or a challenge or a person or a delight that you're facing this week. Because often the gathas can be, instead of about something awful, about the fact that when I woke up this morning, my lover had made me breakfast. I don't have one, but for those of you that do, had made me breakfast. And my wonderful dog came and sat next to me. And the boss called and said that the meeting for today is canceled, so we should take the morning to be alone. And so you can get overwhelmed with that joy. And one of the things that happens for many people is that you then think, oops, when will that end? Or tomorrow couldn't possibly be as good as today. So gatha can also be, when I encounter complete joy, I vow with all beings to cherish this moment and to be open to the next. So we're going to think of one situation or challenge that you might face today, a delight that you might face today or this week. You're going to make your intention that you vow with all beings, and then one action that you can commit to. You'll be fully present and grounded and not stuck with this phenomenon. And then what ease or equanimity might be possible. So here's an example that we can just take, and I can actually put this on share screen if that's helpful, that last page. The example says, when I see a headline that is fear-provoking, I vow with all beings to see the news that is offered by the sun this morning or my flowers in my kitchen, and to fill my heart-mind with this information instead. So that's an example of a gatha. When I'm encountering something, I vow with all beings that I'll do this instead, and that it will lead to peace and ease, is basically the example. So if our host engineer person can put us in 4 groups, and I invite you each to think about one intention that you can make so that you'll be more fully present with you and your fellows and your life instead of ruminating on the reality of the other side of what we're living with. Because there is that, but there's also us and our spiritual practice. We'll go into small groups, and I will post that share screen if that's possible. Well, I'm not sure. We invite you to spend about 10 minutes or so just talking about your intentions with your fellows. Here we go. So thank you, everyone. We had a good discussion. I hope you all did. We have like a couple of minutes. Does anybody want to share one that they came up with, or anybody have a particular insight that you'd like to share or a question you'd like to ask? Did you have something, Jeff?
Yeah, I had the experience. I think the software's been updated, so by default, when I create the breakout rooms, as a host, I'm not in one of the breakout rooms, but I didn't know that.
Oh.
My group kept getting smaller and smaller and smaller. I thought, it must be something about me.
Did you have a nice chat with yourself?
I did. Then I figured it out, and I went and got some coffee, and I came up with there's something wrong with me. As the challenge, the intention is, I vow with all beings not to take everything personally, and the end result could be freedom from misidentification and tyranny of the personal self.
There you go. So I think that's the nature of the practice. And I just say in conclusion that, Thich Nhat Hanh, Suzuki Roshi actually in Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind, his book, actually said that what we need to do is, instead of being so concerned about memorizing the teachings and knowing the teachings, we need to have a strong confidence in just one teaching, that each of us has Buddha nature and each of us has the capacity to be fully awakened. By going step by step and with right intention and right action, which is what the practice is about, that we find our way. And I think particularly during these times, one of my favorite expressions that you always hear me talk about, and so we're not going to escape today, is calm abiding. And we have the capacity to arouse calm abiding, which is what this practice also does. When faced with a challenge or a dilemma, when faced with pure delight that I'm worried is going to disappear, I have the opportunity to settle in to what the lamas have described as one-pointedness, not sleepy or blank, but at rest with the experiences that I'm having, and committed to live fully in heart-mind with all of those experiences. So my wish for all of you today and this week is calm abiding, and I hope that there was something useful in today's talk. I see a couple hands now. I don't know if we have time. Joe, why don't you?
We have time.
Oh, great.
Why don't you let Mike go? Yeah.
Hi, Mike. You're muted.
You need to unmute, Mike.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, Stephen, I am curious about the meeting you were attending in Ireland. What that was, as someone of Irish descent myself, I'm interested, and I go to Ireland frequently too, but I'm interested in what this group might be.
I will. I found it. Somebody gave it to me, Mike. So I'm going to put my email into the chat.
Great. Okay. Excellent.
And if you get in touch with me, I will send it to you.
Okay. Thank you.
But
and Stephen, I just wanted to thank you because it's so timely what you asked us to do. I woke up this morning really writing a script in my mind of an angry conversation I was going to have with my coworkers about an undue burden I felt they had placed on me to do something online that I don't feel capable of doing. And I just had written this righteous script in my mind that was going to make everyone unhappy and, of course, wasn't going to achieve anything. So resetting that intention, because I go into that meeting right from here. It couldn't have been more timely. So I just want to thank you very much.
Great. Thanks.
Anybody else? All right, I turn it over to Joe for announcements and closing.
Any announcements, please?
Next week's speaker will be Kevin Griffin, who's an internationally respected Buddhist teacher and author that we know well from his many visits to GBF. He's the author of One Breath at a Time and Buddhism and the 12 Steps. And he reaches a broad range of audiences in Dharma centers, wellness centers, and secular mindful settings. And that's next Sunday. Also, I want to remind people about Dana. Dana is Pali for generosity and is what keeps our organization afloat. And hopefully you are feeling generous, and you can go to our website at gaybuddhist.org, and on the homepage, at the bottom of the page, or on the donations page, make a PayPal donation.
Or if you're old-fashioned, you can pay by check.
How much does PayPal take out? Did you know?
Like 2%, but we're working on it, a nonprofit status, so that's removed or lowers it to 1%, I think.
Okay.
Well, also, if you're sending money to a friend, they don't take anything out.
Right.
Okay.
Just say GBF is your friend.
Huh. Thank you.
Well, let's gather. Unfortunately, we can't hold hands and stand in a circle, but we can hold the intention to support each other and be, the gratitude that we have to be together. And I'm going to read this dedication. By the power and truth of this practice, may all beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all be free from sorrow and the causes of sorrow. May all never be separated from the sacred happiness which is without sorrow. And may all live in equanimity, without too much attachment or too much aversion, believing in the equality of all that lives. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve.
Have a wonderful day. Thank you, Stephen.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you for listening to the Gay Buddhist Forum. If you would like to hear several new talks per month and be notified of upcoming speakers so you can participate live, please subscribe to this podcast, like us on Facebook, and join our mailing list by visiting gaybuddhist.org.